Reporting and joining us now to discuss what this impending invasion might mean for the U.S. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Joel Rubin and MSNBC military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. Good morning to both of you. So, Joel, why should Americans right now be listening to this and paying attention if Russia continues with its pressure campaign and aggression? And also, what should Biden's strategy be going into this call?
Yeah, Lindsay, what we're watching right now is a very dangerous escalation towards Ukraine by Russia. Russia, everyone has to remember, invaded Ukraine in the Crimea only 7 years ago, 2014, taking over and annexing a significant chunk of that country. So for Europe, our key strategic ally from a national security perspective, Europe is very much nervous on the front lines of a Russian invasion. And for Tuesday, President Biden, he's going to have to really lay down some markers. The good news for President Biden is he actually has reestablished the NATO coalition support countering Russia, unlike the last 4 years, the previous president who let it fray and let Vladimir Putin feel that he could get his way. This president is standing strong along our allies. And hopefully after Tuesday, Vladimir Putin will be clear in his mind that this is a low-cost, low-benefit move for him by invading Ukraine.
Colonel, how far is President Biden willing to go here to defend Ukraine? I mean, there's been talk of sanctions, but also the foreign minister of Russia has scoffed that sanctions would have any effect.
Well, I don't think that the United States, and certainly not the president, is interested in sending troops there to actually defend on the ground or in the air Ukrainian space. We have to look at this in many respects, and one of them is that it's a test of the Ukraine to see whether or not they're actually going to back down from the path, divert from the path of joining NATO. It's also a test of this administration, of President Biden, of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, to see exactly what they're going to do. 170,000 troops is a lot of troops. It's 10 to 15 divisions on the border with Ukraine. It's entirely possible they may invade. One of the things that the president has to do is to ensure that Putin understands that there will be consequences. And though the United States is not necessarily willing to put troops on the ground to defend Ukraine, we have other means of deterring and stopping these kinds of actions, including cyber, which is dangerous in and of itself, but certainly more sanctions. And more sanctions will definitely hurt Putin himself, the people around him, and Russia, Lindsay.
Joel, on that note, do you think, though, that there would be support from the American people in terms of, again, we are a ways away from this, but potential American boots on the ground?
You know, Lindsay, I don't think anyone at this stage wants to contemplate that action. Certainly, that's not something that the American people have been spoken to about. But I think what the general is pointing to is the sanctions route is one that is very powerful. And we have to remember that Vladimir Putin got involved in our election in 2016, largely because he wanted to find a way to get sanctions off of his back, to get the Magnitsky sanctions in particular, which targeted him and his cronies, to get those reduced. And so the American people do understand that Vladimir Putin has been coming after us for some time. So there's certainly going to be some political backing for a tougher line. Military involvement, that is a whole other level. We must remember that 90% of the world's nuclear weapons are in our hands and Russia's hands. There are significant nuclear stability talks always underway between the U.S. and Russia. So those two tracks have to be balanced. But Russia does need to understand that it cannot be invading a country on the heels of Europe and get away with it.
All right, Joel Rubin and Jack Jacobs, thank you both for your time this morning.